My fingers had crinkled the boarding pass in my hand when the announcement came over the speakers. The flight to Chicago was now boarding. I handed my suitcase to the airline staff and turned toward the jet bridge, but my eyes unintentionally swept over the arrivals area outside the terminal. That familiar dark trench coat caught my eye in the bustling crowd. It was Laura. She stood by the railing, a paper bag in her left hand and a bouquet of white lisianthus in her right. Her fingertips rested on the stems, still dotted with drops of water. I stopped, pulled out my phone, and opened our chat. I typed and deleted over and over before finally just sending, "I'm at the gate." I didn't dare type the follow-up. "Didn't you say you were too busy to come today?" Afraid I'd seem like I cared too much. The instant I hit send, I saw her look up, but not at her phone. Instead, she gazed toward the arrival's exit. The wind blew gently, but she looked like she was waiting for someone. A breeze slipped through a gap in the jet bridge, making the corner of my scarf flutter. I stared at the delivered status on my phone screen, holding onto a sliver of hope. Maybe she was busy and just didn't hear the notification. Then, a small stir came from the exit. A man in a cream-colored scarf walked out. He was thin and a little pale, clutching a boarding pass as he walked slowly. Laura went to him almost immediately, the slight frown on her face instantly smoothing out. She lowered the hand holding the flowers, and though I couldn't hear her words, I could see the exceptional patience in the way she leaned in slightly. It was Ethan. I stared in their direction, watching as Laura handed him the flowers. As he took them, he coughed twice. She immediately reached out to adjust his scarf, then pulled a thermos from the paper bag, unscrewed the lid, and held it to his lips. Sunlight streamed through the glass, falling on them so that even their shadows were close, like a complete painting. I was the person standing outside the frame. My phone screen dimmed and lit up again. It wasn't a reply from Laura, but a final boarding call from the airline. I swiped my finger across the screen, scrolling past the message I had just sent, and saw the one from last night. She had written, "I'll bring you a gift when I get back tomorrow, as soon as I'm done with this busy spell." So this was her busy spell, picking up Ethan. The jet bridge was getting more crowded. Someone bumped into me and mumbled, "Sorry." That's when I snapped out of it and followed the flow of people forward. As I passed the glass curtain wall, I couldn't help but look one more time. Laura was helping Ethan with his suitcase, her left hand protectively on his arm as they walked slowly toward the parking lot. She never once took out her phone. The agent at the gate took my boarding pass and said with a smile, "Welcome aboard." I managed a slight twitch of my lips but said nothing. Once I found my seat, I realized my palms were slick with sweat, my phone still clutched in my hand. The delivered status on the screen was like a tiny needle, gently pricking my heart. It didn't hurt, but the numbness was agonizing. As the plane began to taxi, I switched my phone to airplane mode and leaned back, closing my eyes. The scene replayed in my head. The look in Laura's eyes as she handed over the flowers, the way she adjusted Ethan's scarf, and the fact that she was completely oblivious to her phone. I guess some words are really just words, like when she once held my hand and said, "Brandon, no matter how busy I get, I will never ignore you." The view outside the window slowly receded as the engine's roar grew louder. I knew this flight would take me back to a familiar city, but it felt like a part of me had been left behind in the arrivals hall, lost with that unanswered glance, never to be recovered. As the plane broke through the clouds, it hit a patch of turbulence. I instinctively tightened my grip on my phone. The screen lit up again, showing the same chat window. In airplane mode, everything was frozen in that moment before takeoff. The message I'd sent, "I'm at the gate," was followed by a blank space, not even a read receipt. I swiped my finger across the screen and opened our chat history. I scrolled way up to 3 months ago. I was out of town for work, grinding on a project until 3 in the morning. I posted on my social feed, "Coffee is my life support." Less than 10 minutes later, she called, her voice still raspy with sleep. "Send me your address. I'll have my assistant bring you something hot. Don't just drink coffee." At the time, I laughed and told her she was overreacting. But she was serious. "Brandon," she said, "you're always a big deal to me. And then there was my birthday last month. She was called into an emergency meeting at work and missed our dinner. I was sitting alone in the restaurant, staring at the cold cake on the table, about to pay and leave when she rushed in, out of breath. Her blazer was slung over her arm, and she was clutching a small velvet box. "I'm so sorry, I'm late." She fastened the watch on my wrist, her fingertips brushing my skin as she whispered, "I said I'd spend every birthday with you, and I don't break my promises." Those words were still so clear in my mind. And now, here I was, sending her a message from a jet bridge less than 100 yards away, telling her I was about to board. Meanwhile, she was busy giving another man flowers and fixing his scarf, not even bothering to glance at her phone. My fingertip traced her profile picture on the screen. I had taken it last year when we went to the beach. She was standing on the sand, sunlight on her shoulders, smiling so wide her eyes crinkled. I used to tell her she had stars in her eyes. She would hug me, lean in, and whisper in my ear, "My stars are only for you." "Sir, can I get you something to drink?" a flight attendant asked gently, pushing a cart down the aisle. I shook my head, turned off my phone screen, and looked out the window. The clouds were thick, like cotton balls obscuring the city below. My chest felt tight, a suffocating panic rising inside me. I knew Ethan was the one that got away, the unspoken regret of her youth. But she had told me so clearly that the past was in the past and that I was the one she cared about now. I thought back to the day we made things official. She took me to an old movie theater to see a classic romance film. Afterward, standing under a streetlight, she took my hand, her gaze impossibly earnest. "Brandon, I used to think some regrets last a lifetime. But after I met you, I realized that cherishing the person in front of you is so much more important than trying to fix the past. From now on, I will never let you feel wronged or ignore a single thing you're feeling." Back then, her eyes were full of me. I thought that was forever. But now, I lit up my phone screen again, opened our chat, and typed and deleted, over and over. In the end, I sent nothing. Airplane mode was still on. She wouldn't get it anyway. Besides, even if she did, would she even look? At the airport, she never even took her phone out. The passengers next to me were chatting, one talking excitedly about seeing someone they'd missed for a long time. A bitter taste filled my mouth. I turned my head and closed my eyes. Some promises, I realized, are only meant for the moment they're made. Maybe Laura had truly cared about me, but in the presence of her old flame, that care had crumbled so easily. My reflection stared back from the dark screen, a faint redness in my eyes. I put my phone in my bag and leaned back against the seat. Accompanied by the drone of the engines, I drifted off for who knows how long. When the flight attendant announced our descent, I opened my eyes and looked out at the city skyline slowly coming into focus. It was the place Laura and I had lived in together for 5 years, but now it suddenly felt like a foreign country. The jolt of the plane touching down on the runway brought me back to reality. The flood of memories felt like it had been put on pause. I followed the stream of people out of the cabin. While waiting for my luggage, I found myself unconsciously rubbing the case of my phone. It wasn't until I heard the sound of suitcase wheels on the floor that I remembered to turn off airplane mode. The moment the signal returned, my phone exploded with notifications. There were congratulatory messages from colleagues and greetings from family, but nothing from Laura. The last flicker of hope I had, like a balloon pricked by a needle, slowly deflated. As I walked out of the airport terminal, a cool evening breeze blew past. I pulled my scarf tighter and took out my phone to call a car, but a notification for a new social media post popped up. It was from Laura's assistant. My finger paused, and against my better judgment, I clicked on it. The photo was taken in a hospital emergency room. Ethan was sitting on a gurney, his face as pale as paper, his lips an unnatural shade of red. Laura stood beside him, holding a doctor's chart, her brow furrowed with deep concern. The caption read, "Ethan wasn't feeling well, but Laura stayed with him the whole time. So thoughtful." It had been posted half an hour ago, right around the time I landed. I stood frozen, the light from my phone screen illuminating my face, making the evening wind feel sharp and biting. So, while I was above the clouds thinking about how good she had been to me, she was running around a hospital with another man. So, the reason my message had vanished into a black hole was because her attention had been completely consumed by someone else. I remembered how she had panicked when Ethan coughed at the airport. Now I understood. It wasn't just a simple reunion after a long time apart, it was a bone-deep connection. She would drop everything for Ethan, including me, her boyfriend who was boarding a flight and waiting for her reply. My phone vibrated again. It was a message from Brandon. Brandon, that international award was a huge win. Congrats. When's the celebration? We're all waiting to celebrate with you. I took a deep breath and replied, I'll sort it out when I'm back. Then I put my phone away and hailed a taxi. As I got in, I subconsciously glanced back at the airport exit, as if I could still see the silhouette of Laura protectively guiding Ethan away. As the taxi pulled away from the airport, the city lights streaked past outside the window. I leaned against the glass, watching the streetlights leave trails of light, my heart feeling like it had been filled with ice water. Laura and I had been together for 3 years. In those 3 years, she had been truly good to me. So good that I'd let myself believe I could actually replace Ethan in her heart. But now I finally understood. Some regrets can't be fixed by time or a new love. Ethan was the one that got away, the unattainable dream of her youth, the softest corner of her heart. And me? I was probably just the right person who came along at the right time. Like the time her company was in crisis and she'd been pulling all-nighters for days. I went to bring her dinner and found her asleep at her desk, still clutching an old photograph. In the photo, a 17-year-old Ethan grinned in his school uniform. When she woke up and saw me holding it, she snatched it back in a panic, explaining that she'd just stumbled upon it. I chose to believe her then. Looking back now, I know it was no accident. The taxi stopped in front of a hotel. I paid the driver, dragged my suitcase into the lobby, and checked in. The receptionist handed me a glass of warm water. I took a sip, but a chill ran through me. I pulled out my phone and opened my chat with Laura again. My message, "I'm at the gate," was still marked delivered. I didn't send anything else. I just put my phone on silent and dropped it in my bag. Once something cracks, it can never go back to the way it was. Just like my trust in Laura, which shattered the moment I saw the photo of her with Ethan at the hospital. I walked into the room, left my suitcase in the corner, and didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to the window. Outside, the city was a sea of glittering lights, but not a single one was shining for me. I leaned against the wall and slowly slid to the floor. I took a deep breath, and the tears finally came. Not a loud sob, but a silent stream, each drop hitting the cold floor like my heart at that moment, chilled, with no warmth left. The sky outside was beginning to lighten when I finally pushed myself up from the floor. My legs were numb, and tear tracks stained my cheeks. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at my red-eyed reflection in the mirror. I took a deep breath. Brandon, you don't live for love. You worked countless nights for that international award. The celebration has to be perfect. After drying my face, I unmuted my phone. Still no messages from Laura. I didn't even look at our chat window and dialed my assistant, Kevin, directly. Brandon, you landed? You don't sound like you slept well. Your voice is a little hoarse, Kevin said with concern. He'd been with me for 3 years and knew better than anyone how hard I'd worked on this project. I'm fine, just washed up, I said, walking to the window and pulling open the curtains. Morning sunlight streamed in, illuminating the dust motes in the air. About the celebration, do you have a preliminary plan? I do, Kevin said, instantly switching to work mode. I've shortlisted 3 venues, all hotel ballrooms in the city center with easy access. They can hold 150, 200, and 300 people, respectively. The award you won is a big deal, so a lot of industry veterans have asked about attending, and several partners want to come too. I'd recommend the 200-person space. It won't be too crowded, but it won't feel empty either. Let's go with the 200-person one. I cut in, my gaze fixed on the street below, where pedestrians were starting to appear. Budget the food at $300 per person. Mid-range for drinks, nothing too extravagant. Double-check the guest list. Colleagues, key partners, and my family. Don't miss anyone, and don't invite anyone irrelevant. Got it, Kevin said, then added, oh, by the way, Brandon, about Ms. White, should we save her a spot? She's been following this project closely and has asked me a few times when the party would be. Hearing Laura's name, my heart skipped a beat, a dull thud. I thought of how she'd ignored me at the airport, the photo of her with Ethan, and my unanswered message. Don't, I said, my voice calm, with a hint of detachment I hadn't even noticed myself. Don't tell her the time or place of the party. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Kevin's voice was hesitant when he spoke again. Huh? Brandon, did you and Ms. White have a fight? She told me she was going to throw you a party herself when you got back. That she had a surprise for you. We didn't fight. I sat on the sofa, tapping my fingers on the armrest. I just don't think it's necessary. The party is to thank everyone for their hard work, not to put on a show for anyone. She's probably very busy lately. No need to bother her with it and distract her. I wasn't lying, but I wasn't telling the whole truth either. Laura was indeed very busy. Busy taking care of her old flame. Busy making up for the regrets of her youth. She certainly didn't have time for a celebration for the right person. And I had no desire to play the fool, smiling and inviting her to witness my moment of glory after she'd completely ignored me. Kevin seemed to want to say more, but he just sighed. "'Kay, I get it, Brandon. I won't tell Ms. White, and I won't save her a spot. Right, and the party favors, I picked out a few custom pens and notebooks. We can engrave the award name on them. What do you think? That works. Go with what you picked," I said, my tone softening. "Thanks for your hard work, Kevin. I'm counting on you for the party. Let me know if anything comes up." After hanging up, the room was quiet again. I picked up my phone, hesitated, and then opened Laura's social feed. The post about her being with Ethan was still there. Many people had commented, asking if he was okay or saying how thoughtful she was. She hadn't replied to a single one. I backed out of the app, tossed my phone on the sofa, and started unpacking. If I decided to stop caring, I couldn't let these feelings affect me. The celebration was my moment of triumph, and I would be there in my best form, not for Laura, but for myself and for everyone who had supported me. I went to the office that afternoon to go over the party details with Kevin. My colleagues crowded around to congratulate me, buzzing with excitement about the event. No one mentioned Laura. Maybe Kevin had told them not to, or maybe they just sensed something was off. I smiled and chatted with everyone, talking about work, as if I wasn't the same person who had silently wept in a hotel room the night before. Only when no one was looking did my gaze drift toward Laura's office. It was empty. She hadn't come in. I pulled my eyes away, feeling no turmoil, only a faint sense of release. I guess when you're truly disappointed, you don't even have the energy to be angry. I just hoped the party would go smoothly, and that this relationship with Laura could, like the party, have a beginning and a dignified end. It was late by the time I finished finalizing the party details, the warm light of my desk lamp falling on the event schedule. My fingers, holding a red pen, had just circled media interview slot, reserved 20 minutes when my phone vibrated on the desk. As the screen lit up, I instinctively looked over. The name Laura felt like two small pebbles dropped into still water, creating the faintest of ripples. I didn't pick up the phone right away. My eyes were still on the guest speaker section of the schedule, but my mind uncontrollably flashed back to the airport. Her hands holding the flowers, the gentleness with which she fixed Ethan's scarf, and her phone screen, which never lit up. The red pen paused, leaving a small ink blot on the paper. The phone didn't vibrate again. She must have only sent one message. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling light, feeling nothing, almost wanting to laugh. She'd finally remembered I existed. About 20 minutes later, after I'd marked up all the key points on the schedule, I finally reached for my phone and unlocked it. Laura's message sat at the top of my chats. "Have you landed? What have you been busy with? Haven't heard from you." Her tone was casual, as if she were just asking if I'd eaten. She didn't mention the message I'd sent before my flight, nor did she explain what she'd been doing for the past 2 days. I stared at the words "haven't heard from you," my fingers sliding lightly over the screen. Of course she hadn't heard from me. Her attention was entirely on Ethan. How could she have time to check my messages or care what I was up to? I tapped the text box, then typed and deleted. At first, I wanted to write landed 3 days ago. Sent you a message, you never replied. That felt too confrontational, like an accusation. Then I thought about writing, busy planning the celebration, but that felt too curt, as if I were still hoping she'd ask for details. In the end, I settled on a flat, neutral sentence. Landed. Been busy with the party planning. No hurt, no complaint, not even any extra emotion. It was like a work report for a regular colleague. When the sent notification popped up, I tossed the phone back on the desk and went back to the schedule. But I couldn't help but wonder, how would she reply? Would she ask when the party was? Say she wanted to come? Or would she, like before, just disappear mid-conversation? About 10 minutes later, the phone vibrated. I didn't look right away. Only after I had finished checking the media list did I pick it up. Laura had replied, "Party planning is already underway? You must be exhausted." She still didn't ask for the time or place, nor did she say she wanted to come. I looked at the words "you must be exhausted" and suddenly found them ironic. When she was with Ethan at the hospital, did she ever wonder if I was exhausted, planning this party right after landing? In the dead of night when she ignored my message, did she ever wonder if I was exhausted waiting for her reply? I didn't write back. I put my phone on silent and put it in my bag. The night outside grew darker. A sliver of light from a street lamp seeped through the curtains, casting a long, thin shadow on the floor. I gathered the documents on my desk, stood up, and pulled open the curtains. The street below was quiet. An occasional taxi drove by, leaving 2 red taillights that quickly vanished into the night. I remembered one night 3 years ago, when I was also working late on a project. Laura had driven to pick me up. My favorite song was playing in the car, and a hot milk tea was waiting for me in the passenger seat. She had said, "Brandon, don't work too hard. It makes my heart ache." The night was sweet then. The "you must be exhausted" was real now, too, but the taste had changed. It was like a hot milk tea that had gone cold, leaving only a bitter aftertaste. I closed the curtains and walked to the bedroom. I had to be at the hotel tomorrow to confirm the setup. I couldn't stay up all night. Lying in bed, I closed my eyes but couldn't sleep. Laura's messages and her face at the airport replayed in my mind. I realized that when a person stops expecting anything, even their messages become irrelevant. I no longer waited for her replies until I couldn't sleep, nor did I get happy for half a day over a single caring word from her. The phone was on the nightstand, its screen dark, and it didn't vibrate again. I knew Laura was probably off doing something else, maybe with Ethan, maybe dealing with work. In any case, she wouldn't be thinking of me again. I rolled over and looked out at the dark night. It's okay. It's okay if she doesn't think of me. My celebration will be just as wonderful without her. I live for myself, not for her. The afternoon before the party, I was at the hotel ballroom checking the placement of the table cards when my phone rang. It was Kevin. His voice was lower than usual, laced with obvious anxiety. "Brandon, is this a good time to talk?" I asked the setup crew to take a break and walk to a corner. "What's wrong? Did something happen? This Ms. White." Kevin paused for 2 seconds, as if gathering his thoughts. "She came to the office earlier. She happened to see me organizing the guest list for the party and asked if you were having a celebration, and when and where it was." My fingers tightened around my phone, the tips turning cold. So Laura had finally remembered to ask about the party, not by asking me, but by chancing upon my assistant and casually inquiring. "What did you say?" I tried to keep my voice calm, but my heart still gave a little jump as I waited for his answer. I didn't dare say," Kevin stammered. "I told her it wasn't finalized yet, that we were still working on the details and I'd let her know when it was confirmed." She seemed a little upset. She frowned and asked how I didn't even have a rough time, and said that you had mentioned the party to her, but somehow she never got the final details. I leaned against the cold wall, picturing Kevin in that moment, clutching his folder, eyes darting away, stuttering, caught between not wanting to disobey me and not wanting to offend Laura. He'd been with me for 3 years and dealt with Laura often. He knew our relationship and was surely in a tough spot. Did she press you? I asked. My gaze fell on the staff arranging flowers nearby. The pink roses were in full bloom, but looking at them gave me no pleasure. She did, Kevin sighed. She said your award was a huge deal, so how could she not be told about the party? She said she'd told you before she wanted to celebrate with you personally, that she had a surprise. I was cornered, so I just said I was only the assistant, that you made all the decisions and it wasn't my place, and that she should ask you directly. Hearing ask you directly, I couldn't help but let out a small laugh, though it didn't reach my eyes. She had my number. It had been 4 whole days since the airport. She hadn't called me once, hadn't replied to my message, and now she wanted to know about the party through an assistant, who then had to tell her to ask me directly. How could she even bring herself to do that? She didn't call me, did she? I asked. No, Kevin said. After I said that, she stopped asking, but she didn't look happy. She just grabbed her files and left. Brandon, did I do the wrong thing? I shouldn't have told her to ask you, but I had no choice. She was staring me down, demanding an answer. I couldn't just lie and say there was no party. It's not your fault, I said, shaking my head. I felt a faint, numb sensation, like something had lightly brushed against my heart. I was the one who told you not to tell her. You did the right thing. If she really wanted to know, she would have called me. If she didn't, she probably wouldn't have come even if you'd told her. After hanging up, I stood in the corner for a while. It wasn't until a staff member came over to ask if the table card arrangement was okay that I snapped out of it and got back to work. That night, back at the hotel, I showered and lay in bed, picking up my phone and scrolling to my chat with Laura. It was still stuck on our exchange from a few days ago. My landed. Been busy with the party planning, and her party planning is already underway? You must be exhausted. No new messages after that. She hadn't called, and she hadn't texted to ask about the party. I knew it. Her so-called concern was just a passing thought, like glancing at something in a shop window, asking the price, but having no real intention of buying. I remembered what Kevin said about her having a surprise. I didn't know what it was, maybe a pair of cufflinks, maybe another watch like the other gifts she'd bought me. But now I felt no anticipation at all. No matter how expensive the gift, it couldn't make up for being ignored at the airport, for her absence while she was with Ethan, for that message that was met with silence. It's like a piece of candy, no matter how sweet, if it's wrapped in broken glass, who would dare to eat it? I put my phone on the nightstand and turned off the light. In the darkness, I lay with my eyes open, not thinking about Laura or the party. I was just thinking about taking a good, long rest after tomorrow, and then starting to plan my life again, a life without Laura. I learned the truth the next afternoon from Kevin. He stopped me at the entrance to the ballroom, clutching a folder, his face even paler than the day before, as if he were under immense pressure. Brandon, he said, his voice low, his eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. After I hung up with you yesterday, Ms. White called me into her office. I was checking the guest list. My finger paused on Director Brooks' name. I didn't look up. Did she ask about the party again? It was more than that. Kevin's breath hitched, and his voice trembled slightly. She asked why you didn't want to tell her the time, and if you were mad at her. I tried to cover for you, but she was really grilling me. She said if I didn't tell her the truth, she'd have me transferred to a branch office. I finally looked up at Kevin. He had been with me for 3 years, rising from an intern to my right-hand man. Laura had always known he was my guy. Threatening him with a transfer meant she was truly desperate. But that desperation had come far too late. And then, I closed the list and held it to my chest. My voice as calm as if I were listening to someone else's story. And then I couldn't hold it in anymore, Kevin said, his head bowed low. I told her it wasn't that you were hiding it on purpose, but that you saw her at the airport on the day you flew in. My heart gave a gentle flutter, like a feather landing on water, sending out a tiny ripple before settling back into stillness. I also told her you had sent her a message saying, "I'm at the gate," but she never replied. Kevin's voice got quieter. I couldn't help it. I told her the truth. I said you saw her picking up Ethan at the airport, that she was holding flowers and never looked at her phone, so she missed your message and didn't see you. I leaned against a nearby pillar. Sunlight streamed through the ballroom's glass windows, but it brought no warmth to my skin. I could picture the scene. Laura sitting behind her large desk, perhaps tapping her fingers impatiently at first, thinking Kevin was just making excuses for me. But as the words airport, picking up Ethan, and never looked at her phone registered, her expression would have shifted from calm to shock, and then to panic. What was her reaction? I asked. My gaze fell on a technician adjusting the lights nearby. A spotlight cast a bright circle on the floor, like a cage you couldn't escape. She was stunned, Kevin recalled, his voice tinged with disbelief. At first, she said, "That's impossible, I never got his message." Then she shot up and started fumbling with her phone. Her hands were shaking, and she was scrolling so fast, it took her a while to find your chat. I thought of my delivered message, probably buried under work notifications or messages from Ethan, like forgotten dust. When she saw the message, she just froze, Kevin said, a hint of sympathy in his voice. The phone almost fell out of her hand. She had to grip the desk to steady herself. Then she asked me, "He saw me picking up Ethan?" I said, "Yes." I told her you stood on the jet bridge watching for a long time and only left when the final boarding call came. She didn't say anything? Kevin shook his head. She just sat there, staring at her phone screen for a long, long time. It was so quiet in the office I could hear her breathing, and it was really heavy. After about 10 minutes, she finally looked up and asked me when and where the party was. I didn't dare hide it anymore. I told her it was tomorrow night, right here at this hotel. I nodded. I wasn't surprised, nor did I feel anything. So Laura finally knew the truth. She knew her neglect couldn't be explained away with a simple "I was busy." She knew she had missed more than just a message. She had missed my anticipation and my subsequent disappointment. "Brandon," Kevin said, looking at me with worried eyes, "do you think Ms. White will come tomorrow? If she does, we'll deal with it if she comes." I cut him off, reopening the guest list. "Let's keep checking this. The party has to go off without a hitch. Go confirm the media interview order and make sure the party favors are all ready. Don't get distracted by this." Kevin looked like he wanted to say more, but seeing my determined expression, he just nodded. "Okay, I get it, Brandon. I'll go check on things right now." After he left, I stood alone by the pillar. I watched the busy figures in the ballroom. Tomorrow was the big day. Laura would probably come, with her apologies and her so-called surprise. But what did it matter? What was missed, like spilled water that could never be gathered up again. I took a deep breath, pushed aside the irrelevant emotions, and threw myself back into the work. Tomorrow, I would stand in the spotlight and accept everyone's congratulations. As for Laura, whether she came or not wouldn't change this moment of glory that was mine and mine alone. My phone was vibrating nonstop on the dressing table tray while I was trying on my suit. The designer was adjusting the shoulder line, his fingertips gliding over the fabric as he murmured, "Mr. G, this charcoal gray suit is perfect on you. The cut of the shoulders and waist, especially with your frame, you'll look absolutely brilliant in the spotlight tomorrow." I smiled at my reflection, but my gaze went past it to the constantly lighting up phone screen. The name Laura seemed particularly glaring under the warm yellow lights. Ping. Another message came in. I didn't move, just let the phone vibrate in the tray. It wasn't until the designer put down his needle and thread to get some accessories that I reached for it. The screen was filled with missed calls, 13 of them, all from Laura. There were also 5 messages. "Brandon, I saw the message you sent when you were boarding. I'm so sorry. I really wasn't paying attention to my phone that day. Ethan had a sudden asthma attack when he landed and was coughing badly. I was so worried something would happen that I stayed with him at the hospital. I didn't mean to ignore you. Where are you now? Can you please answer my call? I need to talk to you." Kevin told me everything about the party. "I'll be there tomorrow, I promise. I still have your surprise. I'll give it to you in person. Brandon, please don't ignore me, okay?" I scrolled through the desperate, explanatory words, feeling nothing, Not even a flicker of emotion. In fact, it was almost laughable. Esma. He was in danger. And so she could just ignore the message I sent while I was at the airport, watching her meet another man. These excuses came too late. Where were they when I was on the jet bridge, clutching my phone and waiting for a reply? Where were they when I was on the plane, my eyes welling up as I reread our chat history? Where were they when I was in my hotel room, seeing the picture of her with Ethan at the hospital? Now she was panicking. Now she was explaining. But my heart had already gone cold. No words, no matter how beautiful, could warm it up again. I put the phone back on silent and returned it to the tray, turning back to the mirror. The designer handed me a star-shaped lapel pin. "This pin goes perfectly with your suit," he said. "And the star is a great symbol, representing your award, shining like a star." I took the pin, the cool metal cold against my fingertips. I suddenly remembered Laura saying something similar a long time ago. "Brandon, you are my star, always shining in my heart." I believed her then. I treasured every gift she gave me. But thinking about it now, maybe the star in her heart was never me. Maybe it was always Ethan. "This one's perfect," I said to the designer with a smile, handing him the pin to fasten on my lapel. The man in the mirror wore a charcoal gray suit and a star-shaped pin, his eyes confident and smiling. He was no longer the Brandon who got excited over a single text from Laura, or who felt miserable when she didn't reply. It was dark by the time I left the tailor. I got in the car, and the driver asked if I wanted to go back to the hotel. After a moment's thought, I said, "Let's go to the ballroom. I want to check the setup one last time." The staff was still busy when I arrived. The table cards were all set, and flowers adorned the tables. The backdrop on the stage was lit up. The words "Congratulations to Brandon G. on winning the International Design Award" standing out sharply. I walked through the empty ballroom, my footsteps echoing in the quiet space. Tomorrow, this place would be filled with people congratulating me. There would be applause, flowers, and well wishes. I had earned all of this through my own hard work. It had nothing to do with Laura. My phone was still vibrating in my bag, Laura probably still calling. I ignored it. I walked to the back of the stage and stood under the spotlight. The light fell on me warm and bright. I closed my eyes, soaking in this moment of glory that belonged to me. It turned out that without Laura, I could live just fine, even better. I didn't need her attention or affection to validate myself. I could shine all on my own. It was almost 10 by the time I finished checking everything. I walked out of the hotel into the cool night air. I took out my phone and saw 5 more missed calls and 2 new messages. Laura's words were more of the same, but with an added layer of panic. "Brandon, are you still angry? I know I was wrong. Yell at me, hit me, just don't ignore me. I'm downstairs at your office building, but you're not here. I went to your apartment complex, but the security guard said you haven't been back. Where are you?" I read the messages, then put my phone back in my bag and hailed a cab to the hotel. Where she was looking for me was her business. Right now, all I wanted was to get a good night's sleep so I could be at my best for the celebration tomorrow, ready to embrace my moment of glory. As the music flowed through the ballroom, I was clinking champagne glasses with a partner, Mr. Brooke. The light from the crystal chandeliers refracted off the rim of my glass, creating tiny specks of light. Mr. Brooke smiled and said, "Brandon, you've really done our industry proud this time. A beautiful win." I smiled back, about to thank him, when the phone in my pocket began to vibrate. I knew that familiar buzz without looking. It was Laura. The party had started half an hour ago, and she had already called 3 times. I hadn't answered once. "Everything okay, Brandon?" Mr. Brooke asked, noticing my slight hesitation. He raised an eyebrow. "Something urgent?" "It's nothing, just an unimportant call." I pressed the phone deeper into my pocket, willing it to stop. But the vibration grew more insistent, as if trying to break free of the fabric and pull me back into the drama with Laura. The guests around us started to notice, their glances floating our way. I could feel people whispering, probably guessing who could be calling to distract me at such an important event. The phone kept vibrating, making my fingertips go numb. I took a deep breath and pulled it out. The name Laura glowed on the screen, the call interface pulsing, urging me to answer. Maybe you should take it, a colleague next to me suggested, gently tapping my arm. In case it's an emergency. I stared at the pulsing name, my finger hovering over the answer button, but I had no desire to press it. What was the emergency? Was she going to keep explaining her neglect at the airport? Or tell me she was at the hotel entrance, waiting for me to come get her? None of it mattered anymore. I was at my own celebration, surrounded by people who were here for me, basking in the glory I had earned for myself. Laura's call would only shatter this peace, reminding me of the hurt and the pointless hope. My finger slid across the screen and hit the decline button. The vibration stopped instantly. The music and laughter of the ballroom became clear again. I silenced my phone, tucked it into the inner pocket of my suit, and looked up to meet Mr. Brooks' questioning gaze. I gave him an easy smile. Sorry about that. A small personal matter. It won't interrupt our chat. Mr. Brooks nodded knowingly and didn't press the issue, turning the conversation to our next potential collaboration. I listened intently, nodding occasionally, my mind completely calm, as if that insistent call had been nothing more than a passing breeze. Halfway through the party, the MC took the stage. And now, he announced into the microphone, let's give a warm round of applause for the winner of this year's International Design Award, Mr. Brandon G. As he comes up to say a few words, the room erupted in applause. The spotlight found me warm and bright. I straightened my suit jacket and walked onto the stage, taking the microphone. Standing in the center of the stage, looking out at the smiling faces, some familiar, some not, I felt my eyes begin to well up. Not with sorrow, but with gratitude. These people had witnessed my struggle and were now sharing in my success. They were the ones worth cherishing. Thank you all for coming to my celebration, I began, my voice steady and strong. Winning this award would not have been possible without the support of my team, the trust of my partners, and the encouragement of my family. To all of you, I want to say thank you. Another round of applause filled the room. I saw Kevin in the corner, smiling and giving me a thumbs up. I smiled back and continued. A lot of people ask me if I get tired after all these years in design. To be honest, yes, it's tiring. But it's worth it. Because I know that the glory you earn through your own hard work is the most real and the most lasting. I was saying it for the audience, for myself, and for the woman who was still relentlessly calling. I didn't need her attention to prove my worth. I could be my own light. After the speech, I came down from the stage. As soon as I returned to my seat, someone tapped my suit pocket. I turned to see Lisa. She whispered, your phone was lighting up again while you were on stage. Same number. Looked like they sent a text, too. I took out my phone but felt no desire to open it. The messages were probably just more apologies and explanations. I didn't want to read them. The party was still in full swing. A lively, warm scene woven from music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. I held my champagne and chatted with the people around me, enjoying my moment. As for Laura, whether she came or not, how many messages she sent, how many calls she made, it all had nothing to do with me anymore. My life had turned a new page, and I wouldn't be stopping for her. The glow of the spotlight had barely faded from my shoulders when a sudden commotion broke out at the ballroom entrance. The light from the crystal chandelier cut across the room, illuminating the rain-splattered hem of Laura's coat. Her hair was a mess, and her heels were dotted with mud, clear signs she had run all the way here. The chatter in the room instantly died down, and the guests' eyes fixated on her like a bank of spotlights. My fingers tightened on my champagne glass as I watched her march straight toward me. My heart didn't pound as I'd expected. It was more like a lake's surface, rippled only slightly by a passing breeze. Brandon. Her grip on my wrist was surprisingly strong, her fingertips white and cold, the dampness seeping through my suit.
I'm sorry. I'm late.
Ms. White. I cut her off, my voice so calm it surprised even me. This is my party. There are many guests here. She seemed not to hear me. Her eyes locked on mine as she explained in a breathless, jumbled rush. I really didn't see your message. Ethan's asthma flared up. I had to get him to the hospital. I didn't mean to ignore you. I know. I tried gently to pull my wrist free, but she held fast, so I stopped struggling. Kevin told me everything. Her motion froze, her grip loosened, and the panic in her eyes intensified. Then why didn't you answer my calls? Why didn't you tell me about the party? Are you really going to leave me? The air around us felt thick and heavy. Mr. Brooke and Lisa stood nearby, their expressions worried, but no one dared to intervene. I looked at Laura's reddening eyes and suddenly remembered her 3 years ago, standing under a streetlight, talking about cherishing the person in front of you. The moonlight from that night overlapped with the crystal light of this one, but it could no longer warm my heart. Laura. I finally pulled my hand free, my fingers brushing over the red marks on my wrist. You weren't wrong to pick up Ethan. You weren't wrong to take care of him. What was wrong is that you forgot that was also the day I was coming home. The day I waited for a reply to 3 messages that never came. She stumbled back half a step, bumping into a chair behind her with a jarring screech. I didn't forget, She tried to speak, but a sob cut her off. I was just so worried about him. I thought you'd call me when you landed. I thought, there are no more I thoughts. I unclasped the watch from my wrist, its face glinting coldly under the lights. When you gave me this, you said I was your star. But Laura, stars get tired. When all you can see is the moon, the star burns itself out. I gently placed the watch on the table beside us. The clink of the metal band against the ceramic plate was a crisp, final sound, like the last note of our breaking relationship. Her eyes fixed on the watch, her face turning deathly pale. She lunged forward to grab my hand, but I stepped aside, and she missed. Brandon, don't do this, she pleaded, her voice choked with tears. I had never seen her so broken. I know I was wrong. I'll never ignore you again, I swear. Just give me one more chance, please? I looked at the tears welling in her eyes and felt no pain, only the quiet relief of a chapter finally closing. Some mistakes, once made, can never be undone. I thought of the unanswered I'm at the gate on the jet bridge, of rereading our chat history on the plane. In those moments, I had collected enough disappointment to turn my heart to ice. Laura, this wasn't just one mistake, I said, my voice soft but every word clear. The one that got away has always been in your heart. I was only ever the right person. I used to think I could warm your heart, but now I understand. There are some places I can never fill. She stood there, trembling, her eyes looking like shattered glass. No, that's not it. She shook her head, but couldn't find a stronger defense. I was serious about you, I didn't listen anymore. I turned to face the room of guests, raised my champagne glass, and put a smile back on my face. My apologies for the interruption, everyone. Let's continue. The applause was hesitant at first, but it slowly grew back to its former warmth. I knew Laura was still standing there, watching me, but I didn't look back. We were like 2 trains headed in different directions. After a brief crossing at an intersection, we were destined for our own separate terminals. Kevin told me later that Laura stood by that table for a long time, clutching the watch so tightly her knuckles were white before she finally left. When the party ended, I looked out at the night sky. There were no new messages on my phone, no missed calls. I knew she had finally accepted the end. A few days later, I moved out of the apartment Laura and I had shared. I took my things and left the key on the entryway table. There were no arguments, no goodbyes. Our relationship, which had started quietly, ended just as quietly. Later, I heard that Ethan had moved abroad and that Laura's company was expanding into new markets. We would occasionally see each other at industry conferences, share a nod across the crowded room, and then turn away. There was no resentment, no lingering affection. We were just like 2 strangers with a long shared history. I learned that breaking up isn't always a dramatic, hysterical event. Sometimes, it's just quietly letting go when you've finally had enough disappointment, allowing each other to find a more suitable path. We were like 2 trees that had once grown side by side. In the end, we had to grow toward our own sources of sunlight, our shadows briefly crossing on the ground before separating, never to overlap again. My life was finally completely my own.